Welcome to 360. Although this week the Torah portion is Tzav from the book of Leviticus, this week I'm going to deviate from talking about the actual Torah portion, and I'm just going to share a story. I was going back through my files through some of the Tzav sermons that I had shared over the years, and 5 years ago I found this particular text that I want to share with you today. It's a story, and it's a series of 2 letters. And it's a little controversial, but I want to share it with you here on 360 at this moment of stay-at-home orders and coronavirus anxiety. Maybe this is a message of hope and a message of unity amidst the craziness. But it starts out in a pretty dark place. I will share with you that I live here in East Texas. I've been connected with this community for 20 years, and I love it here in East Texas, but we have organizations here, as they are around the country, that promote unity and community and honoring diversity. And all of those organizations should be applauded, especially here in East Texas, where that voice is sorely needed. And sometimes when that voice is expressed, that voice of unity, it's met against a wall. And that's the story that I'm going to share with you. And it happened in Longview, Texas, which is about an hour down the road from Tyler, but it's all part of our neighborhood, really. There is a very large church in Longview called Moberly Baptist, and I'm okay sharing the name of it. And unfortunately, the pastor who I'm going to be talking about recently passed away. So when I saw that in the news and I thought about this week's Tzav, I wanted to share with you the story about this particular pastor. And these are his words, not mine, and then we're going to hear my words after. And I met with the pastor after this incident. There's an organization in Longview called the Unity and Diversity Committee, and they hold a banquet every year. And at that banquet, they honor people and organizations that do things that help bring the community together. A Unity and Diversity Committee in any community here in America doesn't always get the chance to have its opening prayer and its closing prayer be from a Christian-only pastor. In other words, if it's going to be a Unity and Diversity Committee, why not have other faiths represented opening up our community in prayer? Something I'm very comfortable with, but clearly Pastor Stone was not. So Unity and Diversity Committee in Longview opened with a call to prayer by a friend of mine who's a local Muslim. Pastor Stone, on behalf of his church, then put a full-page ad in the Longview newspaper with these words. And I'm going to be looking off screen here while I read you not all of the text, but most of the text. This was a full-page ad in the paper in response to the fact that this organization had a Muslim offer the opening prayer for this Unity and Diversity Committee. So he wrote, America can and should show its diversity as a nation founded on religious freedoms. The City of Longview's Unity and Diversity Committee recently held its annual honors luncheon, in which diversity was indeed the aim. However, an opening prayer to the Muslim God Allah, these are his words, and a closing prayer to the one true God cannot achieve the unity that was strived for that day. He continues, Muslim leaders are being asked to lead public prayers at sporting events, local rodeos, and public gatherings. As a pastor, this is the one up in Longview talking, he said, I am often asked to offer an opening or closing prayer at many such functions, which I readily and joyfully do, recognize that all of my freedoms are indeed gifts from God, and he goes into some Christian verbiage as well. The freedom to pray at such events is an expression of my worship to the one and true God. He then writes this in bold, while every American can worship in private, every American should not be forced to take part in just any worship in the public spectrum, especially when worship is of a false religion. I'm going to repeat that last line. Especially when such worship is of a false religion, he wrote. And then he goes on in his full-paid advertising article that he put in the Longview newspaper, American religious liberties are at risk, and he basically launches into a sermon of fabricated fear that Christians are under attack, and as evidence, we let a Muslim offer an opening prayer at this Unity and Diversity Committee luncheon. The Yiddish word for this, by the way, is Narishkeit. It's silliness or craziness. But this is East Texas. This is unfortunately normative sometimes for our community to have this kind of attitude, certainly behind closed doors. We all know that. But to publicly pay for an ad in the newspaper proclaiming these words is problematic. He ultimately writes in the text, the question is not, are Christians in East Texas being too political? He writes, the question rather is, why aren't all the Christians in East Texas being more biblical? Again, using this as a push to say we need to fight against the open prayer of Muslims in our community. For those who know me or know the Reform movement of Judaism or know what rational religion looks like, this is, of course, an affront on all levels. I have a group of friends in Longview who were shocked that this church used their money to pay for an ad which basically slammed another religious community. And so we decided, my group of friends and myself, decided to raise money ourselves and to fund another full-page ad. If they're going to do it, then we're going to do it, but we're going to offer our voice. So what I'm going to read to you now is our response to Pastor Stone's unfortunate full-page ad in the Longview paper. What we wrote, and I want to share one last thing. This ad actually never got put in the Longview paper. There was another competing version of this article being circulated amongst this group of friends, and the other version got placed in the Longview paper. So the only place this exists is on my computer. But these were the words that I shared to get the ball rolling, and I reflected on them this week when we came to this Torah portion of Tzav, because this happened a few years ago around this time, and I shared this during a Tzav sermon block 5 years ago. And then, of course, when I heard about the pastor's passing, it brought back these memories. So here's what I shared. All too often in our land of freedom, voices of intolerance and misinformation cloud our media landscape. In early February 2015, Pastor Glenn Stone of Marbley Baptist Church in Longview took out a paid advertisement in the Longview News Journal that exemplifies such a voice. Pastor Stone was upset that a Muslim was asked to offer the opening prayer at a community event that celebrated diversity. In his paid ad, he wrote that Islam is a, quote, false religion, among other insults. Pastor Stone has defended his remarks time and again, suggesting that he is simply presenting the information as biblical fact. Side note, I had lunch with Pastor Stone after this incident, and this is where he told me that this is just biblical fact. He had nothing to apologize for. This is continuing the letter. While we defend and protect Pastor Stone's freedom of speech, and we welcome his voice into the marketplace of ideas, it is unfair that he should have the loudest or final public word on this crucial matter. While Pastor Stone represents his vision of truth, we all know too well that it is only one version of truth in the larger patchwork of humanity. We are surrounded by beautiful and holy diversity. Many of us in Longview and the greater East Texas community commit ourselves joyfully to our respective faith communities. We are all holy in our own ways. Our neighbors are Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Baha'i, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, Sikhs, and many more. We love them all as they are. We do not accept the false equivalency of Marbley Baptist Church's binary vision of truth. To the point of Muslim worship in the public square, we are grateful that we live in a country where our Muslim friends and neighbors can flourish. We welcome their energy and talent and prayer in our respective communities. We know that extremist, radical versions of Islam plague the world with violence and terror. Non-Muslims are fearful of this wave of terrorism, as are Muslims themselves. We know that radical Muslims have taken over the public image of Islam, which, in its best iterations, is a religion rooted in intellectualism, progressivism, and peace. Our country has become persuaded by ratings-driven media that Islam is a religion of terror. We all know better. We need to transcend that fear. We recognize that Marbley Baptist Church, among others, promotes this negative stereotype by sermonizing on the topic and bringing in paid experts as per the ad to promote that message of fear. In the ad, they were promoting an upcoming event with an anti-Muslim speaker. Rather than allow this narrative to scare us, instead we open our hearts to our Muslim neighbors with trust and security and love. We are not in control of Marberly Baptist Church's calendar, and so they are certainly permitted to share their fears and narrow view of the Bible amongst themselves. But Pastor Stone chose to make his fear public with a paid ad. Why he did this, we do not know. In a recent conversation with Pastor Stone to one of us, he admitted that he readily acknowledged that, quote, he picked this fight to have. We welcome his voice in the public square, but let us be clear, he is not the only voice. There is a much louder voice of love and peace and compassion and unity in Longview and East Texas. We hear it when we welcome each other into our hearts, no matter what our religion. We hear it when we see ourselves as part of a diverse community, not as a homogeneous bubble within our own echo chamber. We hear that voice when our churches and synagogues and mosques and temples triumph diversity and tolerance over exclusivity and intolerance. We hear that voice of peace when a Muslim offers a prayer to God as a way to start a community gathering celebrating diversity. This is the voice we represent. This is the proud voice of a richer and more compassionate East Texas. This is the voice of holiness. We do not vilify Pastor Stone or Marberly Baptist Church, thereby lowering ourselves to a level of intolerance we seek to avoid. Rather, we ask his community to join us in celebrating instead the diverse voices that truly make up our wonderful community. Sincerely, and we signed it as a group. Again, this was a draft letter that ultimately got cleaned up and edited by other people and put in the Longview paper. And I'm sharing this, and I'm calling out Pastor Stone, and I'm calling out Marberly Baptist Church, but in truth, it could be any pastor or any church. I often share with people here in East Texas, if I let this slide, that they bring in speakers to talk against Islam, or that they pay for advertisements to push down one religion, why not do it to the Jewish community? Why not bring in speakers to talk about why anti-Semitism is important? Or why not pay for advertisements in the newspaper decrying Jews? They could. It's important for us in the Jewish community to respond to those who hurt our neighbors. This is our easy voice. There's not much complicated about it. When we see injustice and we see people knocking our neighbors, we need to push back and make sure that our neighbors feel safe and secure, because when they're safe and secure, we're safe and secure. This is an amazing time in America and around the world as we're all on lockdown because of the virus. We're all reaching out to one another virtually. I felt that this was a good time to share this message of uplift and hope, remembering that our strength comes in diversity. Our beauty comes in multicolors. Our holiness comes in taking care of one another. I wish everyone would have that vision and we could move forward toward redeeming the world. Now go out and be Torah.